Have you ever felt the pain of being treated like a burden by someone you helped lift? Sometimes, life takes such unexpected turns that it's hard to believe that the one who should extend a helping hand is the one who lets go first. Imagine giving up everything, sacrificing dreams and comfort, only to be thrown out of the place you saved. It seems impossible, doesn't it? Well, that's exactly what happened to me. It was just another ordinary morning, until I heard the words I never thought would come from my own daughter's mouth. "You have one day to get out of this house." The blow was even deeper when my grandson, the one I helped raise with so much love, added, "You're not even a real grandmother." It was like feeling the ground open. But what they didn't know is that the power of that story didn't end there. After all, when someone tries to humiliate you without knowing the truth, life prepares a lesson that turns everything upside down. I remained silent, just took a deep breath, and responded with a phrase they would never forget. "Actually, you have 24 hours to find another place to live." And this is where the real turnaround begins. Throughout this story, you'll see how family betrayal can hide behind false smiles, how greed and ingratitude can corrode any relationship, and how, even in old age, there's strength to regain lost dignity. I'll show you how the silent pain of years became a powerful weapon to put everything in its place. If you've ever experienced the humiliation of being invisible to those you've helped most, this story will touch you deeply. Because here, we're not just talking about a home. We're talking about love, sacrifice, and above all, justice. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover that you still have the most important thing, yourself. Now, I invite you to follow me to the end. This story will move you, make you rethink who truly deserves to be by your side, and perhaps awaken a courage you never knew you had. Want to know how the person who tried to throw me out onto the street ended up losing his own ground? Then come with me. I was in the kitchen, holding a dish towel, when I heard the words that tore at my heart. "You have one day to get out of this house." My daughter's voice sounded cold, filled with an anger I couldn't understand. My fingers trembled, not only from the arthritis that had plagued me for years, but from the weight of ingratitude. In seconds, all the silence of the veiled humiliations of recent times became a painful scream within me. Before I could react, my grandson, the one I rocked in my arms and sang to sleep so many times, added with a cruelty I never imagined I would hear, "You're not even a real grandmother." I felt as if a part of me had been ripped away in that instant. It was more than rejection. It was as if all the bonds I'd built with so much love had been severed at once. I looked at them both, and for a moment, I felt invisible. I took a deep breath, trying to swallow back the tears that threatened to fall. I remembered all the times I'd been by their side, the sacrifices I'd made so they'd never want for anything. But in that moment, they saw me as nothing more than a burden. It wasn't just a house. It was the home I'd saved with my own hands, and now I was treated like a stranger invading a space that didn't belong to her. My daughter crossed her arms impatiently, as if she had already made up her mind. "It's not going to work anymore, Mom. You're just getting in the way, taking up space. Tomorrow, I want you out of here." His words were sharp as blades, without a hint of regret. My heart sank as I realized my own flesh and blood was pushing me away from what I had helped build. The silence became heavy, almost suffocating. My grandson, with a disdainful smile, added, "Maybe now I can welcome my friends without embarrassing myself." There, in that moment, I realized how cruelty can be learned and repeated. They no longer saw the woman who had saved them from so much hardship. I found myself reduced to a nuisance, a hindrance they wanted to discard. But as they attacked me, a quiet strength began to grow within me. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't show weakness to those who had already decided to humiliate me. Instead, I simply looked into their eyes and, in the calmest voice in the world, uttered the words that changed everything. "Actually, you have 24 hours to find another place to live." They stared at me, confused, as if they hadn't understood. It was at that moment that I realized the turning point was about to begin. The woman they thought was weak, dependent, and invisible was about to show she still had much more strength than they'd imagined. And at that moment, they hadn't even dreamed of the truth I'd been carrying for years. The days leading up to this confrontation were already fraught with small humiliations that I pretended not to notice. my daughter, Oakley, always found a way to remind me that I was there on a favor, even though she knew that without my help, none of this would have happened. Her once caring gaze had turned cold, and little by little, my grandson Kent absorbed that same contempt like a shadow that spreads unnoticed. It was like I was just a forgotten piece of furniture in the house, something that was there but nobody appreciated. I remember when Kent started avoiding me, asking me not to show up when his friends came over. "They'll think it's weird you're here," he said, unaware that those words cut me like a knife. It was painful to see how the sweet boy I had helped raise was becoming indifferent, almost cruel. Oakley seemed to take pleasure in putting me down. He would always make comments like, "You've already done your part, now it's our turn to take care of life," but never showed the slightest trace of gratitude. I kept quiet, so as not to make things worse. I swallowed every indirect remark, every gesture of disrespect, believing it was better to keep the peace than to confront. But deep down, it ate away at me. I knew this relationship was unhealthy. There was constant psychological manipulation. She made me feel like I owed her an apology for being there, like I was truly a burden. It was true emotional gaslighting, and I began to doubt my own worth. Am I really a burden? Was a question that haunted my sleepless nights. The house rules, which were once lovingly agreed upon, have become cold impositions. Don't touch that. Don't use that. This place is not for you. Even the spaces I'd helped organize became off limits to me. I, who cleaned, cooked, and made sure everything ran smoothly, was treated like a nuisance. It was a silent humiliation, more painful than any scream. And the worst part was watching Kent learn this same behavior. He started looking down on me, mimicking his mother's words. He even compared me to his friends' grandmothers, saying I wasn't as fun or modern as them. The child I rocked to sleep at night became a teenager who was ashamed of me. It was as if, little by little, they were erasing who I was from their lives. But even surrounded by this contempt, I held on to every good memory. I still remembered the girl Oakley once was, sweet and full of dreams. I still saw flashes of the boy Kent was, with a pure heart. And it was this memory that kept me from exploding. I endured in silence, believing that somehow they might still remember the love I gave. But that day, I realized the limit had been crossed. As time passed, the veiled insults became increasingly explicit. Oakley no longer bothered to hide it. She would tell everyone in front of her that I was holding her back. She commented to neighbors that it was difficult having someone at home who doesn't contribute. I listened silently, feeling my heart sink, but lacking the strength to defend myself. After all, how could I argue against my own daughter? The rules she imposed became increasingly harsh. I couldn't sit in the living room armchair because it ruined the decor. I couldn't cook what I liked because the smell would linger. And if I tried to watch television, I'd get the cold words, "You will waste energy for nothing." It was as if I was living in a place that was no longer mine, even though I had given everything for it to exist. Kent, influenced by his mother, began to treat me with the same coldness. When he wanted to hurt me, he made cruel comparisons to his friends. "Jason's grandmother has a beautiful apartment and takes him out. You just stand there." I felt like every word he said was a small blow, reminding me that to him I was nothing more than a nuisance. That sweet boy I'd raised was gone. Even the tasks I did with care began to be overlooked. I cleaned, washed, and organized everything, but Oakley always found a way to complain. If the food was ready, it was very simple. If I washed the clothes, she would say they weren't folded neatly. It was never enough. My every gesture was met with indifference or contempt. It was like being invisible in my own life. There was a day when I sat at the table for dinner and she simply said, "Oh, Mom, you can eat later. Now it's just for the two of us." I felt such a deep pang of pain and humiliation that I had to stand up to hide my tears. I ate alone in the kitchen, as if I were a stranger. There, I realized I was no longer treated like family, but like a disposable object. And worst of all, I realized that for them, it was normal. Kent no longer apologized for his rudeness. Oakley had no problem leaving me behind. They truly believed I was worthless, that my time was up. I'd become just a tolerated presence. and each day in that house became more suffocating. It was in this environment of contempt that my quiet strength began to grow. I endured in silence, but each humiliation was saved like a seed for the right moment. They didn't know it, but I carried within me the truth that could change everything. And the deeper they pushed me, the closer I came to turning things around. Before I was treated like a burden, I was the hand that saved that house from collapse. I remember the day Oakley called me, crying in despair. "Mom, I don't know what to do. I'm going to lose everything. The bank is taking away the house." Her voice trembled like it had when she was a child afraid of storms. My maternal instincts took over. Without a second thought, I promised I'd find a way, even if it cost me what little I had. I sold my small apartment, the one I'd spent 30 years paying for, where every corner held a memory of my youth. I got rid of furniture I loved, books I'd collected, everything that represented my independence. I also withdrew my savings, even the ones I'd set aside for health emergencies. Every penny went toward saving the roof that now denied me. As if the apartment weren't enough, I also sold the family jewels. The ring my mother left me, the pearls passed down through generations. Everything was up for sale. Each object carried a piece of history, but I let it go without hesitation. I did so believing that Oakley and Kent would have a better life, free from debt and fear of eviction. At first, she was grateful. I remember the first few months when she would hug me and say, "Thank you, Mom. I don't know what we would do without you." I felt like I had done the right thing. The house seemed full of hope. Kent was still affectionate, asking me for help with his homework and inviting me to watch movies with him. I felt like I was part of something good, but the gratitude was short-lived. Over time, Oakley forgot what I had done. He began acting as if I was there only because I had nowhere else to go. He began telling others he was helping me, completely distorting the truth. And little by little, the sweet boy that was Kent began to hear only this version. To him, I was the grandmother who lived on favor, not the woman who saved his home. I relived every night I sacrificed myself so they could be safe. I remembered working double time, the extra hours I'd put in to buy Oakley that gift she'd wanted so much as a child. I thought of all the Christmases I'd sacrificed, so she'd never feel inferior to her peers. Every detail showed how immense my love had been, and now, so undervalued. It was in that memory that something clicked inside me. I understood that the problem wasn't that I'd helped, but that I'd forgotten to protect myself while doing so. The sacrifice was mine, but the forgetfulness was theirs. And now, with the weight of everything I'd given, I also held the key that could turn this whole story upside down. That night, I lay in bed with my eyes open, unable to sleep. Every cruel word Oakley and Kent had spoken echoed in my mind, like a hammer pounding relentlessly. I felt small, invisible, as if all the love I'd given throughout my life had been in vain. But amidst the pain, something different began to emerge. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was a strength I hadn't felt in a long time. I stood up slowly, walked to the nightstand drawer, and grabbed a time-stained folder. It was my silent insurance, saved for the day I needed to remind myself who I truly was. Inside were documents that would change everything: deeds, payment receipts, records showing who had supported this house from the beginning. I sat and ran my fingers through each piece of paper, remembering exactly why I'd done this. I hadn't just helped, I was the true foundation of that house. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't as helpless as they thought. If they wanted to expel me, they'd have to face the harsh truth. The old lady they thought was fragile was actually the one holding everything together. It was like a flame was rekindled within me. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control of the situation. I understood that I didn't need to beg for respect. Respect isn't begged for, it's demanded, and when it doesn't come, we walk away. I was ready to show Oakley and Kent that actions have consequences, even when those who suffer in silence seem unresponsive. While they slept, probably dreaming of a life without me, I mentally prepared every word I would say in the morning. There would be no shouting, no drama. It would be a cold, clear conversation like the one they themselves had initiated. I wouldn't ask for anything, nor would I give long explanations. I would simply show them the truth they refused to see. And the strangest thing is that, for the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid. On the contrary, I felt relief. I knew that by revealing everything, I would not only regain my place, but also my dignity. It wasn't just about who would get the house, but about making it clear that I wasn't, and never had been, a burden. They were going to learn that the hard way. At that moment, I understood that the turnaround wasn't just about a roof or silent revenge. It was about rebuilding myself, reclaiming who I was before I allowed myself to be erased. And with that thought, I closed the folder, lay down again, and waited for dawn, ready to turn that humiliation into the greatest lesson my daughter and grandson would ever learn. The next morning, the sun streamed through the window as if nothing had happened, but inside me, everything had already changed. I walked to the kitchen with firm steps, clutching the folder that held the truth. Oakley was drinking coffee as if it were just another ordinary day. Kent munched on toast, not even looking at me. They still believed I was defeated, ready to pack my things and leave. I placed the folder on the table and in a calm tone said, "First of all, I want you to see this." Oakley looked up impatiently, as if I were interrupting her moment. "Mom, please don't complicate things any further. Just pack your bags." I didn't answer. I just slid the first sheet toward her. It was the deed to the house. The silence that fell was almost palpable. I saw her expression change in seconds. First, confusion. Then, disbelief. And then, her face went pale as a sheet. "This can't be. It's a mistake." Curious, Kent leaned closer to look. His eyes, previously filled with disdain, now reflected something new, fear. "What's going on, Mom?" he asked, confused. With the same calm, I continued to show the documents. Proof of bank transfers, bill payments, records that proved who really kept the place running. "When you called me asking for help to avoid losing your house, I was the one who paid for everything. This house has been in my name ever since." My words cut through the air like a thin blade. Oakley stammered, unable to form a sentence. "But, you said it was just to help with the installments." I took a deep breath and explained. "I helped you, yes, but it wasn't just with installments. I bought this house to save you and Kent, and for 3 years I continued paying every bill, every expense, while you treated me like a burden." Kent dropped the toast onto his plate, stunned. "You mean all of this was hers?" he asked, looking at his mother. She didn't answer, just lowered her head, overcome by a silence I'd never seen in her before. I remained firm, unfazed by their sudden change in mood. "Yesterday, you gave me 24 hours to leave. Now, you have 24 hours to find another place to live." The silence that followed was unlike any I'd ever experienced. It was no longer a silence of humiliation. It was the silence of someone finally regaining control. For the first time in years, I saw Oakley speechless. And Kent, the grandson who'd called me a burden, now looked at me with a mixture of respect and regret. The turning point had been reached, and there was no turning back. Oakley was completely floored. I saw his lips move, trying to formulate an excuse, but nothing came out. Kent, who always had quick answers for everything, now just watched me, pale, as if he were meeting another version of the grandmother he'd always underestimated. It was a moment when the weight of their own choices fell upon them, and for the first time, I felt like they finally saw the real me. She tried one last card, her voice trembling. "Mom, please, you can't do this, we have nowhere to go." But there was more despair than genuine regret in her words. I just nodded, maintaining the calm that so irritated Oakley. "Yesterday, you gave me a deadline. Now I'm just giving you the same. You're young, you're capable, you'll find a way." Kent started crying, something I hadn't seen in years. I didn't know, Grandma. I said horrible things, but I didn't know." He tried to get closer, but still couldn't find the courage to touch me. For the first time, I saw a glimmer of genuine regret in his eyes. It was painful, and, at the same time, a small sign of hope for that hardened heart. Oakley, for his part, alternated between pleading and trying to justify his actions. I was stressed, overwhelmed. You know how it is. I said things I didn't mean, but I no longer believed in empty promises. For years, she had the chance to be grateful, to show respect, and she chose to treat me like a burden. It was too late for words that didn't bring change. Later that day, they called relatives and friends, trying to find someone to take them in. I watched them move around, terrified, feeling for the first time the fear I felt when they humiliated me. And for the first time, they experienced what it's like to truly depend on someone, without any guarantees that they would be welcomed. As the deadline approached, Oakley was packed, trying to maintain what dignity he had left. Kent didn't say much, just gave me sad looks, as if he wanted to apologize but didn't have the courage to say it all. I said nothing more than was necessary. You have until the end of the day. Good luck. They were simple words, but loaded with all the meaning of the turnaround. Watching them walk out the door, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief at finally regaining my home, my peace, my dignity. Sadness at having reached this point with those I loved most, but I knew it was necessary. Sometimes, to teach respect, you have to let people face the consequences they've always avoided. As their car turned the corner, the house fell into a different silence. It was no longer that heavy, suffocating silence. It was a silence of freedom, as if the air were finally clear. I walked through the room slowly, experiencing each space as if for the first time. It was strange to think that for so long I had lived there as an unwanted guest, when, in truth, I had always been the owner of everything. I began to open the curtains Oakley insisted on keeping closed. Light flooded the room, revealing colors I'd almost forgotten. I opened the cabinets and found my things stored haphazardly, as if they were unimportant objects. I took everything out, tidied it up, and put it back in its proper place. Each gesture felt like a small rescue of myself. I decided I wasn't going to live like a shadow anymore. I bought flowers for the living room table, hung up frames with old photos that Oakley had hidden, and even prepared my favorite meal without worrying about anyone complaining about the smell. For the first time in years, I felt like the house was truly home. My home. I started inviting people I hadn't seen in a long time. The neighbor who had always been kind, but whom Oakley had pushed away. Old friends I'd stopped seeing out of embarrassment at how I was treated. Little by little, the house returned to laughter, friendly voices, and a human warmth that had been absent for years. It was as if each visit brought back a piece of who I was. Over time, I realized something even more important. I was rediscovering my worth. I understood that love isn't about sacrificing yourself to the point of losing your dignity. True love is a two-way street. It's respect. It's gratitude. And if that doesn't exist, it's not love. It's exploitation. It was liberating to finally accept this truth. I also decided I would no longer shrink to fit into the space others wanted to give me. I set my own boundaries, organized my accounts, changed the rules of my will. And for the first time in a long time, I slept peacefully, without fear of what tomorrow might bring. I had found myself again. In that process of rebuilding, I realized I hadn't just lost the daughter and grandson I knew. I'd lost an illusion, but at the same time, I'd gained something much greater, self-respect. And from that moment on, I knew that any worthwhile relationship would have to be born from something much more genuine. A few weeks after they left, I received an unexpected visitor. It was Kent, standing in the doorway with an expression that mixed shame and longing. He seemed more mature, as if the weight of the last few weeks had taught him more than years of living together. "Hi, Grandma. Can I come in?" he asked in a low voice, almost like a silent apology. I sat with him in the living room and noticed that his eyes were teary. "I just came to say that I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. I was cruel and didn't realize how much I hurt you." The words came slowly, filled with sincere regret. He confessed that, living far away, he began to miss everything he once despised. My cooking, my conversations, even the way I cared for him. Kent told me that things with Oakley weren't easy. His mother still didn't fully accept responsibility for what she'd done, but he was starting to see things more clearly. I realized I was just repeating what she did. I learned to treat you badly because I thought it was normal, but it's not. It was like hearing, for the first time, the sweet boy I raised speaking again. He started visiting me often. Sometimes he'd help in the garden, sometimes he'd just stay to chat. I even brought a friend from school to introduce me, something I never would have done before. It was a simple gesture, but it carried great meaning. He was no longer ashamed of me. It was as if, little by little, we were rebuilding something that seemed lost. Oakley, on the other hand, took longer to show signs of change. She sent short messages, trying to make conversation, but without much depth. I responded politely, but kept my distance. Until one day, she called me and said something that surprised me. "Mom, I'm in therapy. I think I'm finally understanding who I've become, and I don't like what I see." Her voice sounded different, less arrogant, more human. It wasn't an immediate apology, but a first step. I didn't give easy answers. I just said, "Change takes time, Oakley. Regret only makes sense if it becomes an action." She was silent for a moment before nodding. It was the first time I felt like there might be hope. With Kent, the transformation was more visible. He started calling me my grandmother. He proudly helped with small tasks and even asked me to teach him old recipes. His every gesture was like a patch on a torn fabric. It didn't erase the past, but it showed that it was still possible to sow something new. And deep down, I began to believe that not all was lost. Today, when I walk around my house and see every detail in its place, I feel a peace I haven't experienced in a long time. It's not just about regaining my physical space, but about regaining my voice. I understood that love without respect isn't love. It's just dependence in disguise. And I realized that even in old age, it's still possible to stand up, set boundaries, and remind the world that no one is disposable. I've learned that sometimes life puts us in painful situations so we can see who's truly by our side. Blood ties aren't always what sustains true family. Sometimes support comes from where we least expect it, and betrayal comes from those we trust most. This hurts, but it also frees. Because after all, you discover who truly deserves to be by your side. Kent showed me that new generations can still learn, can still change. He chose to reflect, apologize, and rebuild. Oakley, on the other hand, continues on the path of self-discovery, and only time will tell if he can become a better person. I don't carry resentment, but I do carry boundaries. And that, for me, is more important than any hasty forgiveness. If I could leave one message for anyone listening to my story, it would be this: never let anyone erase who you are. Don't accept being treated as less than, even by those you love. And most importantly, never be afraid to remind others of your worth. Respect isn't a luxury. It's the bare minimum any relationship should have. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something similar? Have you ever helped someone on the verge of losing their own self? Or have you ever had to put an end to a situation to regain your dignity? Share your experience, because stories like these help others find the courage to rise again. If this story touched your heart, made you reflect, or gave you a new perspective on relationships and respect, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss more stories like this, full of life lessons and unexpected twists. And before you go, remember, sometimes the greatest act of love is for yourself. Value who you are, because when you respect yourself, the world learns to respect you too. After everything you've heard, stop for a moment and think. How far would you go to help someone you love? And more importantly, what would you do if that person spit on your hand after holding it for so long? Would you have the courage to set boundaries, even if it meant breaking up with the person you trusted most? Sometimes life presents us with choices that seem impossible, but are necessary to restore our dignity. What's harder, forgiving those who hurt us, or forgiving ourselves for allowing certain things to happen? And when someone tries to erase your worth, how do you react? I shared my story because I believe it can open the eyes of those going through something similar. Respect is ageless, priceless, and can't be begged for. Have you ever had to put an end to a toxic relationship? Have you ever had to show that someone who seemed fragile actually carried all the strength? Tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. And if you feel it in your heart, share your experience too. Your story can inspire others not to settle for less than they deserve. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, we always bring you real and profound stories that show how life can surprise you even when all seems lost. Because in the end, the greatest lesson is this: never underestimate the silent power of those who have always loved in silence. One day, that force awakens and changes everything.